Montana Territory, June 1874. The sun was barely up when Thayer O'Connell rode into Dry Creek with a bundle of beaver pelts tied down behind his saddle and 3 weeks of mountain silence weighing on his shoulders. He had not planned on staying long. Sell the pelts, pick up flour, bullets, coffee, and ride back up to his cabin beside the Stillwater River. But the sight that stopped him in his tracks had nothing to do with trade. She was chained to a post outside the saloon. A woman, in a ragged white dress that had once been fine. Wrists bound in iron shackles, face bruised, hair tangled and loose around her shoulders. She stood barefoot on the dusty boards, eyes lifted in defiance to the jeers of the men on the saloon porch. Thayer's horse came to a halt as if it sensed the sudden change in him. "What is this?" he asked, loud enough that the grinning man closest to the saloon heard. "Bride auction," the man chuckled, chewing a toothpick. She tried to run before the wedding. Groom did not take kindly to her nerves. Thayer dismounted slowly, his boots thudding against the ground. "You chain women like dogs in this town? She belonged to Mr. Pritchard. Now she don't. He says if no one buys her, he'll sell her to the brothel by sundown." The woman's gaze flicked to Thayer's face, quick and sharp. She looked young, maybe 20, with proud cheekbones and a mouth set like a blade. Her eyes were storm gray. She said nothing, but she did not look away. "What's her name?" Thayer asked. "Name's Sienna Zeller," the man said, laughing. "Though she ain't got much use for that anymore." Thayer did not answer. He walked to the post and knelt beside the iron cuffs. Her ankles were scraped raw. His hands moved carefully, not touching her skin, only inspecting the lock. "You do not know me," he said quietly, eyes on the cuffs. "But you do not belong here. Do you want to leave?" "Yes," she said, voice flat, hoarse. "Yes, I do." He stood. "Get the key." The man spat into the dirt. "You buying her?" "No," Thayer said. "I am freeing her." That was when the first punch came. The saloon man lunged, but Thayer was faster. He ducked, swung hard, and dropped the man with one well-placed hit. Another came from the porch, but Thayer caught him by the shirt and slammed him into the post. By the time the third stepped forward, the marshal across the street had taken notice. "Enough!" the marshal barked. "Let her go. I never agreed to this mess." "I paid good money for her," came a shout from inside the saloon. "Not anymore," the marshal said. "You want to make a fuss? Take it up in court. But I will not have a woman chained in the street like an animal. O'Connell, get her out of here." Thayer did not ask how the marshal knew his name. He just caught the key the man tossed him, unlocked the cuffs, and caught Sienna as she stumbled forward. He held her gently, one arm steadying her waist, the other bracing her elbow. "You are free," he said. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. "I do not know where to go," she whispered. "You are coming with me," Thayer said. He helped her onto his horse, climbed up behind her, and rode out of town without another word. They did not speak again until they reached the tree line. Sienna sat stiff in the saddle, hands clenched in front of her. She had not asked where they were going. She had not asked who he was. Her silence was not fear, it was something else. Waiting, maybe? Not trusting yet. "I have a cabin," Thayer said. "Northwest of here. It is quiet. No one will find you." "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Nothing." She turned her head slightly. "No man wants nothing." Thayer looked forward. "I want you to have a safe place to rest. That is all." They rode in silence a while longer. Then, after a time, she said, "I was sold by my uncle after my parents died. I was 16. They told me I was going to marry a good man. I did not know he ran whiskey and hit women." Thayer did not reply. He only reached a hand to gently steady her when the horse moved through a rocky slope. "I ran last week," she continued. "He caught me. Tied me there this morning. Said if no man wanted me, he would see me used until I broke." Thayer's jaw tightened. "He will not find you now." They reached the cabin by dusk. It was a simple place, one room, stone hearth, a cot, a table, a stove, and a second cot he had not used in years. He helped her down and opened the door. "You can take the bed," he said. "I will sleep by the fire." She hesitated at the door, eyes scanning the inside. Then she stepped in, slow, like it might vanish if she moved too quick. He brought her water, then food. She ate quietly by the fire while he unpacked his supplies. After a while she said, "Why did you help me?" Thayer looked at her across the room. "Because you needed help. That simple?" "Yes." She stared at him. "No one has ever helped me without expecting something back." He met her gaze. "Then they were not helping you. They were using you." The fire cracked between them. She wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I do not know how to be free," she said softly. "You do not have to know it yet," he said. "Just rest. You are safe." She nodded once, then lay down on the bed. She did not cry. She just stared at the wooden ceiling until her eyes finally closed. Over the next few days, she hardly spoke. But she watched him. She watched him split wood, watched him boil coffee, watched him carve a new handle for his skinning knife. She watched him like she was trying to figure out the shape of him. They ate together. They worked in silence. She helped him clean the pelts, her hands learning the motion slow but steady. One morning she touched his arm. Not by accident. Not for balance. Just a touch. "Thank you," she said. He looked at her. "You do not owe me anything." "I know," she said. "That is why I am thanking you." That night she sat beside him by the fire. Not across the room. Beside him. "I feel like I lost everything," she said. "My name, my past, my pride." He looked into the flames. "You still have your name. You told it to me yourself." She looked at him. "Say it." "Sienna Zeller." Her eyes filled again. "Thank you." He nodded. Then, slowly, she leaned against his shoulder. He did not move. Just let her rest there. And in the quiet, something shifted. He had come to town to sell pelts. But he had found more. He had found her. The weather turned 2 days after Sienna arrived at the cabin, a slow, steady rain soaking the hills and turning the pine-needled ground soft underfoot. The river swelled, brown and fast-moving, and the wind came with a bite that hinted at late spring's last stubborn chill. Thayer patched the roof before the worst of it came through, hammering down new shakes while Sienna stood below, holding the basket of nails and watching the sky. "You always live this far out?" she asked, glancing past the trees' dark silhouettes. "I do." "You never get lonely?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I'm used to quiet." She nodded, looking down at the hammer in his hands. "What made you come west?" He paused, setting the tool aside. "Same thing that drives most men this far. Something I couldn't fix back east." Sienna didn't press. She only handed him the last of the nails and said, "Roof's in better shape than I expected. That's because I don't wait until it leaks to mend it." She smiled faintly just once, then stepped back as he climbed down. That evening, she rolled out dough beside the stove, pressing it into a shape that reminded her of something, though she didn't say what. Thayer ladled stew into bowls, the scent of onion and salt pork filling the room. The silence between them had shifted. It no longer sat heavy. It moved like a river between two banks, steady and sure. After they ate, she sat near the hearth with her legs tucked up beneath her and a tattered book in her lap, the cover soft from too many hands. He watched her read, saw the way her lips moved slightly with the words. "You like stories?" he asked. She looked up. "I used to. Hard to find time for them when you're trying to stay alive." He nodded. "That one about anything in particular?" "It's about a woman who dresses as a man to get on a wagon train west. She ends up saving everyone during a blizzard." He leaned back in the chair. "Sounds like someone worth knowing." "She makes mistakes," Sienna said. "But she doesn't apologize for surviving." The fire popped. Outside, rain beat against the cabin walls in steady rhythm. "You ever think about going farther west?" she asked. Thayer shook his head. "I've got enough space here. I don't need more." She studied him. "That's not what I meant." He looked at her, then quiet and steady. "I know." She didn't ask again. The next morning broke cold and clear, the damp air smelling of pine bark and loam. Sienna stepped out early and walked to the edge of the clearing, her boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. She stood still, breathing in the air like it fed her. Thayer joined her without a word, carrying a tin mug of coffee. He handed it to her, and she wrapped both hands around the warmth. "I don't know what to do with peace," she said. "You don't need to do anything with it," he replied. She turned her face toward the rising sun. "I keep waiting for the noise to come back. For someone to shout. For something to break. It won't. You can't know that. I know this place, he said. And I know myself. She glanced at him, searching his expression. You're not like other men. I never wanted to be. She sipped the coffee. Then, after a moment, she said, I never wanted to be someone's bride. That word always felt like a trap. You're not a bride, he said. You're Sienna. She smiled a little wider this time. And you're Thayer. He nodded once. That afternoon, she found a length of muslin in a cedar chest and set to sewing something at the kitchen table. She didn't offer what it was, and he didn't ask. He chopped wood until his arms burned, then fed the stove and let her be. As dusk fell, she stood from her work and turned to him. I'm not afraid anymore. He set down the kettle. Good. I think, she added, her voice soft, it's because I believe you mean what you say. He met her eyes. I do. I'm still learning how to be in a place where no one owns me, she said. You own yourself, he said. That's enough. She stepped toward him, slow and sure, and laid her hand against his chest. He didn't move, didn't speak. I think I'd like to stay, she said. He covered her hand with his own. Then stay. The firelight flickered across their faces as they stood there, no more space between them than a breath. The storm had passed. And for the first time in a long while, neither of them looked away. The hills wore green now, thick and rising with new growth, the kind that clung to the boots and gave beneath each step. Thayer showed Sienna where the wild onions grew, hidden beneath soft loam near the creek bend. She carried a woven basket and moved carefully between the slender birch trunks, her eyes searching the ground with quiet focus. You ever plant anything? Thayer asked, crouched nearby with a hunting knife in hand, trimming stalks. I used to help my mother with the kitchen garden, she said. Mostly beans and turnips. She liked calendula too. Said it was good for wounds. He nodded, folding one of the green shoots into the basket. Still is. She looked at him, her brow touched with curiosity. You know herbs? Some, he said. Enough to keep myself stitched together. They made their way back along the water's edge, the current soft now, the worst of the spring runoff gone. Sienna walked beside him without needing to match his pace. She no longer flinched when twigs snapped beneath their feet. Back at the cabin, Thayer set to cleaning the onions, while Sienna knelt beside the hearth, scraping ash from the bottom of the kettle. The light outside turned amber, filtering through the window in long, clean lines. She glanced at him as he worked. What's the worst injury you ever had? He didn't look up. Got tossed from a mule up on a shale ridge. Broke 2 ribs. Did you stay put? Had to crawl back. Took 2 days. She exhaled low and even. You didn't call for help? There wasn't anyone to call. She sat back on her heels, watching him. That's a long time to be alone in pain. I've had longer. Sienna stood and crossed to the table. She reached for the tin of salt, then paused. Do you ever want someone to be there next time? Thayer looked at her, his gaze steady. I didn't think anyone would be. She didn't answer, only measured out a pinch and stirred it into the pot. That night, after supper, she sat on the stoop while he sharpened the axe with long, rhythmic strokes. The air buzzed with crickets and the sharp, sweet scent of pine sap. I had a sister, she said, not turning toward him. Her name was Clara. She died of fever the winter before I was taken. He set the blade down quietly. Older or younger? Older by 2 years. She was the brave one. She'd sneak out and ride the neighbor's colts bareback when no one was looking. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You sound like you miss her. I try not to, she said. It still hurts the same. They sat in the hush that followed, neither rushing to fill it. A whippoorwill called from across the clearing. Do you think we carry grief with us, or do we become it? She asked. I think we carry it, he said. But it doesn't have to be the only thing we hold. She turned then, meeting his eyes. What else do you carry? He studied her face, the way her hair caught the last of the light. Hope, he said. Though I didn't know I still had it until you came here. Her breath caught just once. Then she reached for his hand, her fingers threading through his. She didn't squeeze. She just held on. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low, casting soft light over the table and the small chest where she had begun stacking her sewing. The muslin she'd worked on now took shape as a dress, a simple one, cream-colored and unadorned, but hers. "I never had a choice before," she said as they stepped inside, hand still in his. "Every part of my life was decided by someone else. You have one now," he said. She looked up at him. "Then I choose this." His hand brushed the side of her face, rough thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I want to stay, not because I need to, but because I want to know what it means to belong without being owned." He drew her close, arms around her, and she rested her forehead against his chest. There were no promises spoken, no vows exchanged. Only breath, heartbeat, and the steady warmth of two people who had already survived the worst. Outside, the stars blinked into view, and inside, the space between them closed for good. By late July, the Stillwater ran low and clear, and Sienna had taken to walking the banks barefoot in the early hours, gathering stones smooth enough to line the garden bed she'd cleared behind the cabin. Thayer watched her from the porch some mornings, coffee cooling in his hand, the quiet between them no longer something to be bridged, it was simply shared. She'd started humming sometimes when she worked. Just under her breath, half melodies without words, like she was remembering something that hadn't been hers in a long while. He didn't ask about it. He just listened. One afternoon, as heat shimmered off the dust path that led into the woods, Thayer came in with a rolled canvas under his arm and dirt clinging to his boots. "I found something," he said. She was kneading dough at the table, forearms dusted with flour. She glanced up, pressing her thumb into the edge of the dough to test its give. "What is it?" He unrolled the canvas carefully on the table beside her. Inside were two rusted iron hinges, a handful of square nails, and a small carving chisel, the handle worn smooth from years of use. "They belong to my father," he said. "He taught me to build with those. Found them buried behind the shed where I must have forgotten them after the fire." Her hands stilled. "What will you make?" He looked at her. "A door. For the second room." She wiped her hands and moved closer, fingertips grazing the chisel's handle. "You're building on? I figure it's time. You deserve your own space if you want it." She looked at him for a long moment, eyes searching his. "I don't need my own room to feel like I belong." "I know," he said. "But I want to make space for your life here, not just let you live in mine." That night, she brought out a folded scrap of paper from a cloth sack she kept beneath the bed. She unfolded it slowly, smoothing it flat on the table. It was a map, hand-drawn, the ink faded but legible rivers, landmarks, a crooked line tracing westward across the plains. "My father gave me this the day before he died," she said. "He wanted to take us all to Oregon. Said he'd seen the coast once and never stopped dreaming of it." Thayer leaned closer, eyes following the trail her finger traced. "You think you'll still go?" "I used to think I had to." She folded the paper again, her hand lingering on it. "But now I think maybe his dream was about starting over. I've already done that." He didn't speak, but his hand found hers across the table, warm and calloused and still. The days grew long and golden. The scent of wild mint drifted from the creek beds, and the garden Sienna planted began to sprout in earnest rows of beans, a few heads of cabbage, even a patch of calendula near the porch. She kept her sewing things in a wooden box Thayer carved for her, and in the evenings she stitched by lantern light while he read aloud from a worn copy of Plutarch's Lives, his voice steady and low. One evening as they sat beneath the stars, she leaned into his side, her head against his shoulder. "I don't know what to call us," she said. "You don't have to call it anything," he said. "Unless you want to." "I do," she said. "But not like before. Not as someone's property." He looked at her, his voice quiet. "Then what do you want?" "I want to build something with you. A life. A place we tend together." He turned slightly, enough to see her face. "That's what I want too." She kissed him, then, not tentative, not uncertain, but with the surety of someone who had chosen, and been chosen in return. Their hands found each other, and the space between them dissolved like mist in morning sun. Later, as the fire burned low and they lay wrapped in one blanket, she whispered, "Do you think love can grow in broken ground?" He brushed his fingertips along her arm. "I think that's the only place it ever really does." She slept with her hand on his chest, the rise and fall of his breath steady beneath her palm. And when dawn came, it found them there still together, rooted in something that had no need for names, only the quiet certainty of two people who had survived everything but had not been hardened by it. They had not planned for love, but it had come and it had stayed. And now it was theirs. The cabin's second room took shape slowly, each board planed by hand, each joint fitted with quiet precision. Thayer measured twice and cut once, jaw set in concentration, while Sienna marked lines with a bit of charcoal and learned the rhythm of the saw. She preferred working the drill, leaning her weight into the brace, arms taut with effort. They rarely spoke while building, but the silence was easy, filled with the small sounds of wood yielding to will. On a late August morning, she pointed to the half-framed wall and said, "I want a window here." Thayer paused, ran a hand over his beard, then nodded. "You'll see the ridge from there. Good light, too." She watched him sketch the frame lines with the side of a nail. "I don't want to forget what the world looks like." "You won't," he said. "Not here." They finished the frame by sundown. Sienna stood back, brushing sawdust from her skirt, and said, "I never thought I'd help build a home. I thought I'd only pass through them." "You're not passing through this one," Thayer said. That night, she found a cedar branch and stripped it of bark, carving slow, even strokes with the old chisel. She didn't say what it was for, only wrapped it in a square of linen when she finished and set it on the shelf beside the door. The next morning, they rode out together. She wore the cream-colored dress she'd sewn, now faded from sun and work, and carried a small pouch Thayer had stitched from buckskin. He led them east, through narrow switchbacks and across a shallow ford where the water ran clear and cold. They didn't speak until they reached a sloping meadow filled with golden grass. He dismounted first, tying the reins to a low branch, and helped her down. She stood close to him, eyes scanning the ridge. "My mother's grave is east of here," she said. "Somewhere past the river. I never got to mark it." Thayer didn't ask why. He simply waited. She pulled the linen-wrapped cedar from her pouch and knelt, placing it upright in the soil. "I carved her name, best I could remember it." He stepped beside her. "She'd be proud of you. I hope she'd see I made it out," she said, "and that I didn't let what happened to me be the whole story." He crouched beside her, hand resting lightly on her back. "It's not. You made something better." They stayed until the light shifted, and Sienna rose with dirt on her knees and a calm in her face that hadn't been there before. By the time they returned, the sky had turned the deep blue of late summer evenings, and the cabin looked different, somehow more lived in, more whole. Thayer brought out a tin of molasses and the last of the cornmeal, and Sienna made hearth cakes with the ease of someone who knew what she was doing. As they ate, she said, "You ever think about marrying again?" He didn't look up. "Not until now." Her voice didn't waver. "I'd say yes if you asked." Thayer set down his fork. "I didn't want to speak it too soon. I didn't want to make you feel hemmed in." "You haven't," she said. "Not once." He reached for her hand. "Then I'll ask." She nodded. "Yes." They married 3 days later, with the ridge behind them and the river running low in its bed. The marshal from Dry Creek came up by horseback, surprised but willing, and Sienna wore a blouse she'd embroidered with blue thread and a skirt Thayer had helped hem when the old one frayed. There were no witnesses, only the pines and the quiet hush of wind through grass. But when Thayer spoke his vows, Sienna didn't look away. After, she pressed her forehead to his and whispered, "Thank you for waiting until I was ready." He answered, "You were always worth the wait." The garden yielded late but full. They preserved what they could: pickled beans, dried apples, jars of wild honey traded from a trapper who passed through in early September. Thayer built a bench beside the porch, where they sat in the evenings, her head resting in the crook of his shoulder, his hand draped over hers. She began to write again, setting charcoal to paper, not letters but line sketches of the land, the slope of the trees, the bend of his profile in firelight. He didn't ask to see. She showed him when she was ready. One morning, She placed a drawing on the table. A woman standing beneath the ridge, sunlight falling across her shoulders, her face turned toward the trees. "That's you," he said. "It's who I've become," she answered. In early November, the first snow came light and soft, more a whisper than a storm. Sienna stepped outside in her shawl and turned her face to the sky, letting the flakes melt against her skin. "You think we'll be here a long time?" she asked. Thayer joined her on the step. "As long as we like." They stayed through winter, through storms and thaw and the hush of late nights wrapped in quilts and each other. And when spring came again, and the creek swelled with meltwater, Sienna knelt in the garden with her hands in the dirt and a child growing quiet and steady inside her. She didn't say much when she found out, just took Thayer's hand and placed it lightly over her belly. His voice was low. "You sure?" She nodded. "I'm sure." He kissed her temple. "We'll raise them here, in peace." And they did. Years passed. The porch bench weathered to gray and the garden grew wide. A carved cedar marker stood beneath the ridge, and beside it, 2 more names etched deep by careful hands. The cabin held laughter now, small feet on wood floors, stories by firelight. Sienna and Thayer grew older, but not apart. Their love didn't fade. It settled into the bones of the place, into the worn handles of the kitchen drawers, the smooth stones lining the garden path, the quiet way he still reached for her hand without needing a reason. They had built a life not out of what they had lost, but out of what they chose. And in that choosing, they found not just survival, but joy. They never left the Stillwater. They never needed to. It was home.